Welcome to the Extraordinary Purpose Podcast, where we explore some of the truly difficult questions and challenges that parents and their families face every day. Whether it's the sometimes painful process of parenting teens and young adults, navigating relationships with your partner and children, or you discovering your purpose in relationship with yourself, we will bring heartfelt and vulnerable conversations to the table to support and empower you. Our mission is to help you create a lifestyle full of love, passion, adventure, and influence. Here we go.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Extraordinary Purpose Podcast, to another solo episode with Erin. I'm so excited to be here with all of you. I just had to re-say that like 3 times because I forgot the name of my own podcast for a minute there. Oh my goodness. Chris and I just got done doing an interview for somebody else's podcast, so I think I was just confused for a minute. We love going on to other people's podcasts. It was really fun. We got to talk with this incredible psychologist who has written books on resilient parenting, and she's starting her own podcast. And it was just really fun to connect with other like-minded people around parenting and teens and young adults and all that good stuff. And on that topic, I just wanted to make sure you know, Chris and I are putting the finishing touches on relaunching our parenting program. So that will be coming out very soon. And I'm so excited. It's so powerful. You guys, if I do say so myself, if you are a parent, a mom who's really looking to take better care of yourself, really to learn how to model your own journey of personal growth, reconnect with your own passions, your own purpose, rediscover your strengths and your values, and learn how to have just healthier boundaries, better communication with your kids, so much more. This is going to be an incredible program for you. So we will be starting our waiting list soon for people to sign up for that, and we're going to keep you posted. Really, really good stuff. So today we're going to talk about trust, and not just any trust, but really this idea and this practice of leaning into trusting yourself and learning how to really hear your own feminine intuition. I recently listened to a podcast that I really love, and she was talking about something she read in Forbes more recently, that culturally, we are in sort of this trust recession. We are struggling as humanity to trust companies, to trust brands, to trust the government. We're just having a hard time trusting in general, as we should be in a lot of ways. And there's just so much information and misinformation coming at us left and right all day long from so many different platforms, social media, the news, everywhere you look. So we're in this place where we struggle to trust authority and trust all of these powers that be and these bigger corporations and brands and things like that. But something she said that was so profound, because this is so close to my heart as a woman, as a human being, as a mother, as a coach for other young women. She said that what's happening is not a terrible thing. The silver lining here is that we are being given this opportunity to start trusting ourselves again, to start really leaning in and asking ourselves, what do I think of this? What is my take on this? What would my more authentic self do? What do I think of this? How do I want to live my life, whether in this aspect of my life, whatever it is? And I think that it's relatively new for a lot of people. This practice, this idea, this way of living, of getting quiet and listening to yourself, to your own gut instinct, to your own feminine intuition, to your truth. What do you want? And so I loved listening to that. And I had already been thinking about this podcast topic that I wanted to do on being resourceful and learning how to become more self-educated. And so this really just helped me tie it all together. And so that's what I want to talk to you about today. And I think I want to start with, first and foremost, if you are somebody who has always listened to other people, And I say that with zero judgment. If you're somebody who always listened to your parents and went to college and chose a major or studied something, maybe because other people told you were really good at it, and you probably are. You just are somebody who's kind of followed the rules and did things the way you thought they should be done, the way other people before you did them, the way you were told this is the right thing to do in life. And maybe you're somebody now who, like so many of us, is stopping and pausing now and looking around and thinking to yourself, what do I want to do here? Maybe you became a mother and it made you stop in your tracks and think about what you want to do differently. Maybe you are in midlife and you've been doing things your whole life for other people, or walking the line and doing things the way you think they should be done. And you're waking up to, what do I want for myself now? There's so many moments throughout our lives where we have this aha, this awakening. And so if you are somebody who's lived your life that way and now you're wanting something different, I want to talk about some of the steps you can take to start making that happen. And I'm going to interweave some stories from my own life, because what I can tell you is that, for better or for worse, because there's so many pros, but there's so many cons to this too, is that I have, for the most part, been somebody who has walked to the beat of my own drum. I have made more unconventional choices in my life. I am somebody that, when the way that works for everybody else doesn't resonate with me, it's like I have to find my own path. I literally just have to find the journey that works best for me. And so I think sometimes it's easy to look at people who take the road less traveled and think, wow, that's amazing. I wish I was more like that. It must be great to just live like that. And it's not. It is ultimately. There's a lot of freedom in it. And I've learned so much, but it's not necessarily the easiest path to take either. So where do we start trusting ourselves? Where do we start leaning into that intuition? And as I really sort of reflected and pondered on this past few days before I put this episode together, I was thinking about my own journey and, like, where did that start for me? And what I recognize is that it starts with presence. It starts with slowing down. It starts with getting quiet and tuning into yourself and beginning that process of starting to listen. At the time in my life when I started this journey, it wasn't super intentional, because I was just in my early 20s on this new journey of personal growth. And I had this mentor that I had met through a boyfriend at the time, who taught me about self-observation and taught me about meditation. And I started to learn how to get quiet, how to slow down, how to observe myself doing the most mundane things, doing my dishes, making my bed, just going to get my mail. I was taught by my mentor to just to observe, not to judge, not to necessarily need to change anything, but how do I start just observing my thoughts, my feelings, my inner dialogue with myself, my resistance to doing some of these mundane things, and then doing them anyway. And I learned how to meditate for long stretches of time in order to observe my thoughts and observe what was going on within me. And so this was really incredible work. I was probably 23, 24 when I first started this journey. And so when I started to think back on my own life, like, when did I start making some of these bigger decisions for myself? What were some of those earliest memories I have where I was like, I made that decision based on what I knew was in alignment with myself, with my truth, with what I truly wanted, not what somebody else was telling me to do. And I recognized that it was very much during that period of my life. And it's no surprise, because when we learn to slow down and we learn to get quiet and we learn to start listening and observing ourselves, all of the answers are right there. Our truth and what's truly meant for us is all within us, but it takes slowing down and getting more present. And in our culture today, it's louder than ever. I mean, this was back in the early 2000s, right? It was just starting to get really loud. And you know what I mean, just social media and technology and so many different opinions coming at us. And so this is why I talk so much on the podcast. You know, when Chris and I do our episodes together, we talk a lot about my morning routine, because having that time in the morning to slow down and get quiet with yourself before the world takes over, before kids need you, they need mom, before your partner needs his partner, before my clients need me, is to get quiet and just check in with myself and listen to what's really going on within me. And so I'm going to share just a few different times throughout my life where I really put this into practice. And I'm hoping this is going to offer some inspiration. Maybe some of you will really relate to some of this as well. I know for myself, I was very much like this when I was younger, and then I've gone in and out of phases in my life throughout my 30s and my 40s now, where this has ebbed and flowed for me. And so maybe you're in one of those seasons where you're lost touch with that part of yourself and you want some inspiration to reconnect with that. So during this time when I was in my early 20s and I was doing this self-observation and doing this work, I was modeling at the time. I've shared that before. I was living in New York City, and I started to have an issue with my skin. I never had acne as a teenager and adolescent, and just was very fortunate to never have that issue. But in my 20s, I developed this skin condition, and I had all these like sort of bumps. It was almost like a rash underneath my skin. And obviously as a model, you can't have a lot of skin issues going on if you want to work. So my agent and my booker sent me to a dermatologist to kind of, what's going on here? And they wanted to put me on Accutane, like right away. He was like, yeah, we'll get you on some Accutane, get this cleared up. And I'm like, Accutane? This was before we had the internet at our fingertips and cell phones, but even just the sound of Accutane, I'm like, that just sounds pretty extreme. So I went back and talked to my agent, and she was like, yeah, we're not doing that. That's really extreme. You don't have that kind of acne going on. She said, let's take a breath here and figure out what's next. And I was in Sephora maybe a day or two later. Must have been the really early Sephora days. I think it was a long time ago. But I was standing in line at Sephora, and I was waiting to check out with some products. And I remember looking up at the wall, and I saw this book. And it said The Perricone Prescription. It's from Dr. Perricone. And it was the acne solution, or the acne prescription. And I just had this moment of like, and it said something about the anti-inflammatory diet. It did say that. And I was intrigued. And so I followed my instincts, right? And I grabbed this book and bought it and took it home. And I read through this book like it was a college study. And I took notes, and I started to follow this process. I went and cleared out my refrigerator and my pantry. I went to Whole Foods, started buying all of these different whole foods and healthier foods and anti-inflammatory diet foods. And it slowly but surely started to become my lifestyle. My agent also had me go on a birth control pill at the time. She thought maybe the skin stuff was hormonal. So I did do that, but I did that, and I lined that up with my own research and starting to take some new actions myself. And yeah, my skin cleared up. But more importantly, it put me on a completely new trajectory of my life. And so over the next year, I only started shopping at Whole Foods. I started subscribing to like Mother Earth magazine. I wanted to understand more about what was going into the foods I was eating. I became really interested in holistic health and healing and how food and nutrition can heal. And it just opened my mind up to this whole new world that really has been part of my journey ever since. And so as I thought about that, driving in my car the other day, I just felt really happy and just really proud of myself. And I was like, it's so important for us to go back as we get older, especially going into midlife, and really think back to those earlier times in our lives when we made some of these bolder decisions and find the pride in that, find the excitement in that. just like we would for our own kids. And so that sort of became my new normal, that way of living. And I would say over the next couple years, the movie The Secret came out. If any of you remember The Secret, the book and the documentary about law of attraction and having clarity on your future, knowing what you want. And so I started to get really clear about what was next in my life. I had been modeling for a lot of years. I learned so much about myself. I was on this new personal growth, spiritual journey in my life. And then I found this whole new way of living in terms of eating and holistic health and all of this. And I was like, what's next for me? And I really had this urge to leave the city and start my life, this next phase of my life. So I started to get clear on what does that look like for me. I started journaling on it. And I was single at the time. I was not with anyone. Very consciously, I made a decision to be on my own for a couple years. Is that phase of my life in my 20s, I wanted to learn about myself. And I was just so busy working on me, which is my passion for working with young women today, obviously. So I started to get clarity on, I knew I wanted to have kids. I was an aunt for many years to my nieces. My sisters are 7 and 9 years older than me, and I had nieces when I was quite young, as a young teenager. So I helped raise them and influence them and mold them as well. And so I couldn't wait to have my own family and be a mom. And so I felt like that was going to be in the cards for me pretty soon. So I started to get clear, like, how do I want that to go down? You know, how do I want to have my babies? Do I want to have hospital birth or home birth? I started learning all this stuff about home births, and I subscribed to Mothering magazine. I don't know if any of you ever subscribed to that. It's a brilliant magazine. And I'm not sure if it's still in print. I hope it is. And so I started exploring all of that and writing out my vision for what this next phase of my life was going to look like. And when I met my kid's dad back then, we started talking right away about the near future of why that I wanted to have kids and settle down, and he wanted the same thing. So I told him about my idea for a home birth, and his sister-in-law had home births. And so fortunately, it wasn't very foreign to him, but you know, that was a difficult choice for me to make. And I look back on that time in my life and I recognize that I walked through that so bold at just 30 years old. And so many people around me either did not know what I was doing. They didn't know if I knew what I was doing, or I was just making some impulsive decisions. For me and my family, like, I don't know where this came from. My mom did not have home births at all. My mom didn't even breastfeed. I don't think my sisters did either one of those. So I remember thinking, where is this coming from? Where is this pull? But it was just me. It was my intuition. It was my feminine instinct to recognize that I just knew deep down that giving birth was not an emergency. And in my mind, black and white, plain and simple, why would I go to a hospital to give birth and do the most natural thing that a woman can possibly do? My body is meant for this. And some of it was the things I was reading, and some of it was just in me. It just was in alignment with my authenticity and what I truly wanted for myself and what my beliefs and my values. And so I just knew that that was my journey and that's what I was going to do. And so I started educating myself. And that's a big part of this process, you guys, is yes, it's slowing down, it's getting quiet, it's getting present so that you can be in touch with yourself well enough to know what are your values, what are your beliefs, what is your authentic self. And then that next step is, once you recognize what those things are, you have to educate yourself. That's such a big part of this process, getting resourceful and harnessing self-education. And so I started educating myself and learning everything I could, magazines, books about hypnobirthing. And when we moved from New York City to New Hampshire, right before I got pregnant with my son, River, and as soon as we moved there, I found a naturopath doctor who was also a midwife. I sought her out before I even got pregnant because I knew that was going to be my journey. And sure enough, within a few months of knowing her, I got pregnant. And I read up on circumcision and vaccines and all these things I knew that I was going to need to make these big decisions about. And I talked to my midwife all the time and just picked her brain and asked questions. So I became very self-educated. we had a lot of resistance. I had a lot of other people around me that wanted to influence my decisions. His other sister-in-law was in her residency to become a doctor, very young and very green, and she really thought she knew everything, and she let us know it. And so every time they would come to visit, she was in his ear, just, what is she doing? She's so irresponsible. This is crazy. She can't have a baby at home. Anything could happen. And I knew it was happening, and I just kept following my journey, and I knew what I was doing, and I just had to keep connecting with that part of myself. And it wasn't easy. And so a lot of times when we make these choices based on what's best for us from the inside out, and we're trusting our own intuition, you're going to get a lot of people around you who don't understand what you're up to, right? And think that you're crazy and making really irrational decisions. And so that's the challenging part of all of this. But the beauty in it is that after I gave birth to River, it was the most beautiful birth. It was a 12-hour labor at home, beautiful, healthy birth, healthy baby. She came to me later and said, "You are a rock star. I can't believe you did that. You pulled it off." And I was like, "I told you so." And at the time, and I don't remember why I know this statistic, but now home birth is so much more mainstream and so many women are doing it, and I love that. But at the time, I remember reading the statistic. I was like 1% of women in America that was having a home birth. And so that was scary. And I don't think I recognize, it's hindsight now, right? That I look back and think, what was I thinking? What was I doing? But that, and I almost want to cry every time I talk about this, because that was one of the most profound, if not the most profound decisions I've ever made in my life. Trusting my body, trusting my femininity, knowing that I was meant to do this. The most natural act in the world is to birth a baby at home, and trusting that part of myself set the stage for really the rest of my life and how I was going to parent my children. And I had another home birth with Skylar, my daughter, 4 years later. And so much of my early parenting choices stemmed from that experience and learning to trust myself. And even that, my early parenting was often not necessarily criticized, I think questioned at times, and sometimes a little bit maybe snickered at because I did things differently in my own way. But again, I just trusted what was best for me. And so the last story I'll touch on, and I think I'm going to do a whole podcast just on this topic because it's so close to my heart. It's such a big part of my journey, like a little bit later in my life and more towards my 40s, is my struggle with drinking in my life. And when it got really bad in my early 40s, and that journey, that whole journey of me finding my way to the other side of it and becoming alcohol free and finding my journey and finding what worked for me was really challenging. It was challenging enough just to be somebody going through that and dealing with addiction and dealing with the reality that I felt like I had this whole other way of living, and yet this alcohol was impacting my life in a way that I never could have expected. So dealing with that while becoming a single mom and getting out of a toxic relationship and environment, and having a lot of people around me not understand why I wasn't just following the rules and doing what anybody else would do in my shoes, go to rehab, go to AA meetings, follow the typical path to recovery, because it didn't work for me. It didn't resonate with me. It did not align with me as a woman. Every aspect of it just did not resonate with me. And yes, there's a lot of different forms of recovery now, and those were just on the horizon back when this was really impacting my life. So I did look into that. But by following my gut and my intuition and trusting in what was best for me and wanting to learn based on what I knew was going to work better for me, I opened myself up to more self-education. I read every book, every memoir, every book you could imagine on alcohol addiction and the neuroscience behind it and the spiritual aspect of it and memoirs and just wanting to understand why this was impacting me the way it was and searching for alternative ways to overcome this, to manage it, to get better, to get on the other side of it, to get sober, whatever you want to call it. I just was not going to be somebody that was going to let this define me for the rest of my life. I did not want to label myself as anything. That was my issue with some of those meetings. I just felt that, yes, this is part of my journey. I even knew when I was in the throes of it that this is going to be something that I'll talk about, I'll educate other women on someday. I know I'm going through this for a very specific reason, but I'm not going to let it define me forever. And that journey was really hard, and some people very close to me had to take a step back and let me find my way. It was a very, very lonely time in my life for a while, but I do not ever regret it. And I am so happy that it took what it took for me. And again, it's a much bigger story that I'm going to do a whole podcast on here pretty soon. I've been working on that episode. But just to say that even in that part of my life, trusting my intuition and finding my own journey, there was no other way for me. And now I have learned so much on the other side of that I can offer other women, especially at this stage of life and the specific circumstances I was in. I think it's so much more common than we recognize, and I can speak to that in a different way now. And in the process, I just learned so much about different modalities and different medications and different ways of becoming alcohol-free or sober. So that's really what this is about, right? This is about learning to slow down, learning to trust yourself, learning to get present, learning to get quiet so that you can hear what's best for you, and trusting yourself. So although we're in this phase in our culture right now of having a hard time trusting, not knowing who to trust, what to trust yourself, right? Get quiet. Lean into yourself, start listening more to what's best for you, for your kids, for your family. And when we can model that for our kids, that is the most profound thing we can do for them. To me, that's the best form of mothering, is letting them see you and watching you build your life from that place. All right, my friends, I hope this served you today on some level, and I love you so much. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next week. Take care. We are so thankful for you and your beautiful family, and hope you found something inside today's episode that brought you hope, inspiration, and most importantly, a path forward. If you're interested in evolving your relationship, giving your kids the most important gift of personal growth and development, or are a mom looking to reconnect with your confidence and become empowered in all areas of your life, then schedule a discovery call with us today. Our mission is to help as many families as possible find their purpose, and that starts with you. See you in the next episode, my friends.